Hi YouTube, so welcome back to part 2 of the Cat 973 build. Now as you can see, I've painted all the parts, and in this video I was thinking we should assemble the chassis and put together the lifting mechanism and also assemble the tracks. Now I know I said I wanted to paint them in the first episode, but I changed my mind. I kind of like this color, so I will go for the unpainted tracks. So yeah, I think we'll just jump right into the build and let's begin with the cabin. Now this is a Windows template and I will be using this now to create the windows for this. Now you might notice that this piece is not as nice as the others. That's because I used my trusty old CR10 to print this piece. Anyway, let's begin building. So I've got the windows cut out and I'm going to use my soldering iron to install them onto the cabin. So what I did here, I screwed this nut too far into the threaded rod. So now when I put it inside here, it actually stops the wheel from turning. So I have to move this nut a little further out. So it should be 5 mm from this side of the nut to the end of the rod. There we go. So 5 springs onto the threaded rod. Now we're going to mount the sprockets. And first I'm going to mark out where to make the groove right here. And then after we have installed the sprocket, we're going to install the rollers right here. Now let's try to mark it. It doesn't fit. So let's try with the drill instead. Yeah, we can kind of make out where it is. So I'm gonna make a line here. Yeah, I think that's it. So I'm going to hook up my Dremel now. So now we're going to install the rollers. And we have to use these spacers between the bearings. So this is a M5 by 30 screw, and you just put it in here. You put on a bearing. This is a 5 times 11 times 4 bearing. Now you put this spacer like this, then you put in the last bearing. You don't need to put any lock nuts on the back side here. So I'm going to install all these rollers, and then once I'm done we're going to figure out how to mount this last one. Okay, so all the front rollers are now mounted, and I think the best thing to do now is to mount up the sprocket, and then we mount up the cover in front of the sprocket, and then we put in the final roller. Now you could put in a threaded rod like this, but I don't want this to be different than these. So I'm going to mount up the sprocket now. As usual, I use the gel glue. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the cover. So this is the cover that will sit in front of the sprocket to keep all the debris and dirt out of it. So we need 2 countersunk screws here. So now we can finally put the final roller in place. There we go. Okay, so now I can assemble the chains and put on some wires on this motor. Might be a good idea. Anyway, I'll do the other side of the running gear off camera, and I'll see you soon. So while I was assembling these parts, I realized that I forgot to install the top rollers. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. I'm using these screws, but that's only because I don't have any other screws in this length. So you're not supposed to use a countersunk head on these parts, but I will be doing that. So the length of these screws are 16. So this is a 5mm by 16. So what you do now, you take one of the bearings, the same bearings as underneath, put it in here. Then you grab one of the big spacers, put it in there, and then you grab another bearing, put it in like a hamburger. Then you just insert them like this. Make sure that you don't screw it too tight. You don't want to lock up the bearings. And also make sure that it's lined up in the middle where the chain will go. So I'm doing the funniest job on the earth right now, and that's assembling the tracks. So if you're going with the 3D printed tracks, like I am, you need these long set screws. Now these are M3 by 16. You just assemble them. Yeah, let me turn on the lights. You just assemble them like this. And then once you're done, put the super glue a little tiny bit on the backside of each. That will prevent them from coming back out again, like they did on my dozer. So I'm going to assemble the final piece on this chain, and in total on one side with the 3D printed tracks you need 33 pieces.
Dangerous times, don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.
So that's one side finished. And make sure you mount the chains this way. So both tracks are now finished. And now I'm going to install the front pendulum mounts. Now I'm going to be using these. These are the actuator mounts that actually come with the actuators when you buy them. Now these pieces are going to be sitting right here. I can see that I've forgotten to put the hole in the model, but don't worry, I will make sure to fix that before I release the files.
So high I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky.
So now that we have finished the running gear, let's move on to the lifting mechanism. And we gotta press fit more bearings. So as you can see, I've taken off the front of the chassis in order to mount all the lifting parts, because I don't think we can mount the lifting parts while this thing is mounted to the chassis. Especially when mounting the end switches, we can't have any access to them with this piece on. So I'm going to mount the arms with the screws just to keep everything in place. I'm going to mount the arms right here now, and then we're going to assemble the lifting mechanism that goes onto the motor right here. For those who built my loaders with the upgraded lift, this is nothing new to you, so this is basically the exact same pieces that I use on my loaders. So right now I'm marking out where I should cut a groove with my Dremel. These grooves are for the set screws, these small little pieces that go inside of these holes right here. These grooves will actually help the set screws sit tighter onto this axle. Now when you mark where to put the grooves, make sure that this motor coupler sits in the middle of the lifting arms, because if you put it too far in, this lifting mechanism or the lifting links will be offset, and that will be very bad. So you gotta put it in the middle of the arms. So I'm going to cut both of these grooves with my Dremel now. Okay, so now we're going to mount these lifting arms onto these motor couplers, like this. As you can see, there's no pre-made holes on these, and the reason for that is because these cheap motor couplings are actually not the same. I mean, they are all different, because when they made these holes for the set screws, this hole can be a little offset, and it will make these parts not fit if I made pre-made holes here. I can show you an example right here. I have mounted both of these, and you can see this hole is up here by the screw, and when I flip this around, the hole is much longer in than the other one, so they are not the same. So how do we fix this? We just put these lifting arms on loosely like this. Do the same on the other side, like this. Then we mount these lifting links onto the arms right here. We do that on both sides. I'm going to find some screws now. Like this. Now when you mount everything like this, everything should line up perfectly. But before we make the holes for the screws in this piece, I'm actually going to take this off, because I've forgotten one important step, and that is, you can see the set screws in here, and you want them to be, let me show you, you want the set screw to be down here. So I'm going to rotate the motor and make the set screw sit down here. I'm gonna leave a mark, it's around there somewhere, or it's facing that way. So I'm going to put the battery onto the motor and make it rotate. Perfect. Now the reason I do this is because if you mount these arms over the set screw, you can't access it later on. You can see it down there now. So if I mount them like this, I can access the set screw. And that is important. So let's put the other one on. Now I'm going to use my soldering iron. I do this because when I press the soldering iron down, it will self-center inside of the holes on the coupler, and that way I get the holes perfect. So all the holes are now melted. I didn't melt this hole right here. Well, that's because there's nothing on the backside here, so you don't really need to drill a hole there. Now I'm going to use my 3.5mm drill and drill all the way through. Not through the plate right here, but through this lifting arm, of course. And then I'm going to insert M4 by 10 screws. So that's the lifting mechanism done, and now we gotta create the endpoints. Okay, so I just realized that if I'm going to create the end switch for the down position on these arms, I actually have to connect this front chassis piece onto the main chassis and then turn the arms down. And once they're down, I keep them in that position and take off this piece again and then put on the end switch. I'm going to connect the running gear onto the main chassis first. That way we know how high this will sit and where the arms are going to end up. So I think the arms are now positioned more than enough in the down position. So I'm going to go ahead and make the end switches now. Okay, so here's how I solder the wires for the end switches. Here we have the black wire from the motor. It goes into the end switch on this side, and then we got the one-way diode here with the gray spot pointing towards this wire, which is the black wire that goes into the black wire on the ESC. and here's the red wire from the motor. Comes into this end switch on this pin right here, and here's the one-way diode with the gray spot pointing towards the red wire that continues down into the red wire on the ESC. Now I hope my explanations aren't bad. I'm trying my best. If we were all speaking in Norwegian, this would be no problem at all. Explaining all this would be no problem. But since my English is not the best, I kind of struggle sometimes. So I hope this helps, and I will now mount this front piece onto the chassis. But first, I'm going to have to mount the pendulum inside here. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna have to take this chassis off again. I mean, remove the running gear so that I can mount the front onto this piece. Now, I don't think you have to mount this in the first place like I did. You just position this arm right here straight down and you should be good. So I'm going to take this off. So the front pendulum is now mounted up, and here's how it works. So this is the pendulum for the bucket. I think I mentioned it earlier that I only printed one of these because I want to test if this functions as intended before I paint it and before I print unnecessary parts. So I'm just going to mount this onto the arms now, and I will check if the bucket has the correct movements and so on. So I have connected one of the actuators onto the pendulum, and then I've put the bucket link down here, and now we're going to mount up the bucket and check how everything lines up. Alright, so I've been testing the functions of this pendulum and everything is not in order. It's not good in any way, so I'm going to have to rework this pendulum piece and figure out how to fix this. Right now it doesn't even tip the bucket forward while it's lifted, so I'm going to sit down and have a look at this. Anyway guys, that's as far as I can go on this build right now, before I figure out the pendulum thing. And I think this build is coming along pretty nicely so far. So in the next video I should have this pendulum fixed, and I will assemble the rest of the loader, and we can begin assembling the electronics, and I will walk you through step by step on how to do that. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.